The stadium fell into an almost haunting silence as the crack of the bat echoed through the night. Every fan, every player, and every coach froze for a split second, watching helplessly as the ball sailed past the outstretched glove of the right fielder. It was the moment everyone had feared but no one wanted to admit might happen. Ishii stood on the mound, motionless, his glove still hanging by his side, eyes wide open, unable to process what had just occurred. The monster known as Yanagi had done it again. A clutch, game-tying hit that shattered the fragile wall of confidence Ishii had built inning by inning. The camera caught the instant pain in Ishii's face. He didn't scream. He didn't argue. He didn't even move. He just stood there, blinking against the flood of emotions crashing inside him. The crowd erupted, not in cheers for him, but for the man who had taken his moment away. That noise, that deafening sound of celebration from the opposing side, stabbed at him deeper than any defeat before. He turned his back to the field, his head slightly bowed, shoulders trembling. The scoreboard glared down on him like a cruel reminder, all his work, all his pitches, all his control, undone by one swing. When the inning ended, Ishii walked off the mound slowly, dragging his feet, his glove pressed against his face to hide his tears. But even through the leather, his emotion was raw and visible. His teammates noticed immediately. The bullpen had been watching closely, sensing his struggle, feeling every pitch as if they were throwing it themselves. As Ishii reached the dugout, he sat heavily on the bench, staring blankly ahead. He didn't take off his cap, didn't speak a word. Just stared. His breathing was uneven, his eyes glistening. It wasn't just frustration, it was heartbreak. Then, one by one, the pitchers began to gather around him. The first was the veteran closer, who placed a strong hand on Ishii's shoulder. "Don't cry, thank you," he said softly. The words cut through the noise, simple but powerful. Ishii didn't respond right away, but the gesture itself, those 4 words, felt like an anchor in a storm. Another teammate, a younger pitcher who had once looked up to Ishii as a mentor, knelt beside him. "We saw how you fought," he said. "Every pitch, every strike. That wasn't weakness out there, that was heart." Still, Ishii couldn't stop the tears. He tried to hide them, wiping his face quickly, pretending to adjust his cap, but everyone knew. The cameras caught the moment, a grown man, a professional athlete, breaking down under the weight of expectation and loss. And yet, in that raw display, there was something deeply human, something even beautiful. The fans who once shouted criticism now fell silent. Some even clapped. They knew this wasn't about failure. It was about the sheer emotional cost of caring too much, of giving everything and still falling short. The pitching coach approached next. He didn't say much either. He just looked Ishii in the eye and nodded slowly. That single gesture told 1,000 stories, of nights spent in bullpens, of countless games where luck was cruel, and of the unspoken bond that only pitchers truly understand. Ishii nodded back weakly, but the tears still came. His chest rose and fell rapidly. He looked out toward the field where Yanagi stood proudly on second base, surrounded by cheers. It was the same Yanagi he had studied for weeks, the batter he thought he finally had figured out. And yet, when it mattered most, Yanagi had found a way. Inside the dugout, the atmosphere shifted. The team wasn't angry. They were hurting with him. Baseball is cruel that way, it gives no guarantees, no matter how perfect your preparation. The scoreboard doesn't measure effort or heart, only results. But among teammates, those things matter deeply. As Ishii sat there, his mind replayed the pitch, the grip, the release, the sound of contact. It was just a bit too high, a bit too centered. "If only I had," he muttered under his breath. But his teammate cut him off. "No, if only. You gave us everything." That sentence struck something inside Ishii. He took a deep breath and finally raised his head. His eyes were red, but there was a flicker of resolve returning. The veteran smiled faintly and handed him a towel. "We've all been there," he said. "You'll get your turn again." And that's when it hit Ishii, the realization that baseball is a game of redemption. Every failure is followed by another chance. Every heartbreak opens the door to another story. But in that dugout, in that heavy silence filled with quiet encouragement, he wasn't alone. Fans watching from home could feel it too. They saw not just a pitcher, but a man carrying the emotional weight of competition. They saw teammates who weren't just colleagues but brothers. They saw the pure essence of sport, the vulnerability behind the toughness, the tears behind the training. On social media, messages started to flood in. "Ishii, don't give up. That's what real passion looks like. You made us proud tonight." In a world obsessed with victory, Ishii reminded everyone what it means to fight. As the game moved on, the bullpen prepared to step up. The next pitcher warmed up quietly, occasionally glancing toward Ishii. He wanted to honor him, to keep fighting because Ishii had given everything he had. That's the invisible bond among pitchers, they inherit not just the game but the emotion of the one before them. Every throw becomes a continuation of that story. When the next inning began, the bullpen erupted with energy, clapping, shouting encouragement. "Let's go!" For Ishii, echoed through the dugout. Ishii finally looked up and smiled faintly through the tears. He stood up, walked to the edge of the dugout, and leaned against the railing. The crowd's lights shimmered against his face, and though the pain still lingered, there was pride too. He had faced a monster and given his all. Sometimes, that's all that truly matters. The game teaches humility, but it also teaches courage. And on this night, Ishii embodied both. Unagi's hit would go down in highlights, but what the cameras couldn't capture was the quiet heroism behind Ishii's breakdown. Because true sportsmanship isn't about the roar of triumph, it's about how you carry yourself when the world falls silent. The teammates around him knew this. They stayed close, some cracking small jokes to lighten the mood, others patting him on the back. Slowly, laughter began to seep in again. The tension melted just a bit. Baseball, after all, is a long season. One game doesn't define a man. The manager, watching from the end of the bench, gave a subtle nod. He had seen many players over the years, some broken by moments like this, others reborn through them. He knew Ishii would be the latter. "Let him cry," he whispered to the bench coach. "That's what makes him great. He cares." In those few words was a truth every athlete knows but rarely admits. Caring too much hurts, but it's also what fuels greatness. As the innings went on, Ishii stayed by his teammates' side, cheering every out, shouting every call. His voice cracked, but his spirit didn't. When the team finally got back to the dugout, he was the first to greet them. He clapped, he encouraged, he smiled. The tears had dried, replaced by determination. "Next time," he muttered, "I'll get him next time." And in that promise, the entire team saw hope. After the game, as cameras followed the players heading back to the clubhouse, Ishii lingered a moment on the field. The lights were dimming, the fans were leaving, but he stayed. He took off his cap, looked toward the mound, and gave a small bow. It wasn't about apology, it was gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to fight, to feel, to fail, and to grow. Baseball is unforgiving, but it gives moments like this, moments that turn pain into purpose. Back inside, the teammates waited for him. Someone had placed a cold drink on his locker. Someone else had written on the whiteboard, "Thank you, Ishii. You gave us a chance." He smiled quietly at that. The words echoed the ones he had heard earlier, "Don't cry, thank you." It wasn't pity. It was respect. It was love. That's what a team is, a group of people who pick you up when the game knocks you down. By the time Ishii left the stadium, the night air was cool and calm. He walked slowly toward the bus, still replaying the game in his head, but this time, the sting was softer. He knew what had happened couldn't be changed, but it could be redeemed. And as he glanced up at the stars, he whispered to himself, "Tomorrow's another day."